Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to run some .NET Core tests, specifically Selenium tests in Azure DevOps. What you need to accomplish this is an Azure DevOps account and Visual Studio 2017 or better. In this video, I'm going to use Visual Studio 2019 Preview 3. So first, what I did in Azure DevOps, I actually created a project called Selenium Demos, and I have an empty Git repo, and we're going to actually use this to store our projects and then do builds and release with that. So I'm going to jump into Visual Studio now. So I connected to this project, and we're basically going to create a new project in this repo. So I already done that, so we're going to basically take an MS Test .NET Core project. We're going to give it a name, so we're going to call it Selenium Demo. And we're going to create it. So this creates an empty project with basically a unit test in it that we can kind of play with. So I'm going to basically delete this unit test because we don't need it. I'm going to create a new test. So we're just going to say add new item, search Google. So we now have our tests. We're going to make this public. And we're going to put a little bit of scaffolding into our test project now. So under dependency, I'm going to manage my NuGet projects. I'm going to pick a few things. So we're going to call it, we're going to start with Selenium. And we're going to pick under Browse. We're going to pick the WebDriver. So we're going to install that. We're then going to install Selenium support. So we're going to do some tests with the Chrome driver. And in order to do that, there's a bunch of Chrome drivers. So if I just look for Chrome, you'll see that there's a Selenium Chrome driver, then there's a selenium.webdriver.chrome driver, then there's another one from Chromium. So the one you want to pick is this one here. So selenium.webdriver.chrome driver. That's the important one to pick. Now, if we want to run some tests in Azure DevOps, we can't pick the latest one right now because the hosted agent don't have Chrome 70 and 71 or 72 installed. So they only have Chrome 68. This will change over time, but at the time of this video, there's only 68 installed. So we need to actually pick 2.40 for this to work. So I'm just going to install this the Chrome driver, and if we go to update now, we'll see that if I remove the X here, we'll see that we can upgrade the driver, which we don't want to do, but we are definitely going to update the test framework. That's the Microsoft framework that comes with the project. So first of all, we're going to add the test class attribute to this so that we know it's an actual test class. We're going to use the unit testing, the MS test unit testing. So we have our class. Now we're going to create a new test method. So we're going to add the test method tag here. Go public search for cheese. Void. All right, so now we have our method, and we'd like to put some code in here. So I'm just going to go and get some code I already have. So we now have some code here, and we're missing a few using. So I'm just going to basically pick the right using. So we want to have Chrome here. For this, we want to have IO. For this, we want to have reflection. And for this, we want to have Selenium. And finally, for this, we want to have support. All right. So now we have everything going. Our test is there. Our basically our bootstrap is already here. So let's run the test now. So this will start a browser, and it'll go to Google, and it'll search for cheese, and it'll come back and say that it found cheese Google search as the title of the particular browser when it ran some cheese. All right. So it's a simple test. So it goes to Google, it finds the element for where we put our search parameter, sends cheese to it, submits it, and it waits until it finds the title that starts with cheese, and then we basically assert to make sure that it's okay. So it's a simple test. That's not the point of this video. The point of the video is to show you how to bootstrap everything together. So that's fine, but it evidently won't run in Azure DevOps because we don't have a browser popping up into the hosted agents. So how do we get around this problem? So Google offers the opportunity to run some headless test. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new variable called Chrome options. And here, and we're essentially going to add it at the end of our Chrome driver setup. So essentially this is one of the important things. You want to make sure that the driver has the path where it is in order to be able to basically start, because it's looking for the chrome.exe. So this is one way of basically setting it up to make sure that the driver knows where it's actually going to start. So path.get directory name assembly, get assembly.location, and then we pass the option which says that it's going to run in headless mode. So if I run the same test now, we'll see that it's going to start, but we're actually not going to see a browser. It's just going to run behind the scene and come back with our result, which is fine. So another thing we can do is we can run that from the command line. So since we're running .NET Core, I can now go into our project and basically I can say .NET test and then Selenium / the project. So if I do that, this basically will just start the .NET Core engine, and it's going to start a test. And since this is headless, it's going to come back with the run was successful. So this is for test, but if we want to run it directly from a binary, which we'll need to do in Azure DevOps, we would do .NET VS test, and then Selenium demo, bin, debug, our test here, and we're looking for our DLL. And if we do this, we can see that we're basically pointing to the DLL directly. And that's important because when we build, we won't have the C# project into our build output. So we actually want to run some tests based on the DLL instead. So we can run all this from the command line without any Visual Studio, and that works fine. Now, one of the problem with .NET Core is that we need to publish everything that we build, including all the packages that are built with this project, because if we don't, we won't be able to run our tests in headless mode on a hosted agent. So a few other things we need to add is to make sure that this actually works is the Microsoft test platform test host. I'm going to go into browse here. So we need to add that version 19.9. So this is a DLL that's needed to run some tests without having Visual Studio around. So we've installed that, which is fine. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to add a specific parameter to our projects so that when we publish our projects, it's actually going to take the Chrome driver and put it in the binary of the published output, or else it wouldn't do that. So this is the piece of code we need to add. So it's called publish Chrome driver equals true. We're going to save this, and now we have a full project that is ready to go to Azure DevOps. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our changes. So this is all the stuff we added to this project. We're going to commit this as the initial version. I'm going to commit this. Then we're going to sync our changes and push our change to Azure DevOps. And we're going to actually go to Azure DevOps to continue. So here's my repo. I'm going to refresh my repo, make sure everything is here. So we have our Selenium demo, and I have a nice button here that says, let's create a build for this. So we're going to start. We're going to say that this is an ASP.NET Core. I'm just taking this template because it has all of the .NET specifics to actually create my project. But essentially, I'm going to change a few parameters so it's not an ASP.NET application. So we're going to pick this, and this creates all the .NET Core steps that we need. So the first thing we want to change is we don't want to use the Ubuntu agent pool because we want the Chrome driver.exe to be part of our output. And if we use the Ubuntu, it's going to create a Chrome driver without the .exe, and it's actually going to be a Unix specific executable, and it won't run after. So we're going to change this, and I'm basically going to use the hosted Windows container build agents. So we're going to build all of our stuff here, our tests, fine. So let's go to, first of all, the restore. Make sure that this is a restore. It's going to restore all our stuff from our C# project. And then we don't have any specifics, so we're going to leave it like that. Our build command is very simple. We want to build the release configuration, and then there's nothing else to set up. Under test, I'm actually going to remove this from here because this is a build, so we don't want to run any, there's no unit test in this project. This is a Selenium test. So since we don't have any unit tests, I don't want to run any tests at this moment here. And then finally, we want to make sure that we publish our results of that build into VSTS. So first thing is, remember when I said that it was the ASP.NET specific, so we don't want to publish web projects. So that's one thing. We don't want to zip our outputs and we don't have the project name into our publish pad. So this is all the stuff we want to untick from the publish task, and then we should be good to go. So I'm actually going to basically leave it like Selenium demos. So we're going to basically save and queue a new build. I'm going to look at our build here. All right, so this build took about 50 seconds. And if we look at the artifacts, we can go into drop, open that up. We can see that we have our Chrome driver. We have all of the different DLLs that are needed to run. We have our DLL for our demo. So everything is ready to go. Now we want to actually execute those tests. So how do we do that? We want to create a release for this. So we're going to click on release here. It's actually going to go and bootstrap a release for us. And essentially we're going to create an empty template. And we're going to say that this is our dev stage. We're going to go into our tasks. And I'm going to add one task here, which is .NET Core, which is quite simple. And then we're also going to add a published task. So we're going to publish our results here. So first thing in the .NET build, I want to, if you remember when I was running from the command line, I could have run test. Now test, essentially, I need the CS proj in order to run some tests. So since I don't have the CS proj, I want to run a VS test. Now it's not part of the basic commands that are available here, but I can choose custom and then run the VS test command here. Now this needs some arguments, and the arguments are logger :trx semicolon log file name equals test.xml, for example, right? And then the path of the exe that I actually want to run is */ and then we have selenium demo.dll, right? This is the DLL that we have here. So we're going to change this to run selenium tests. And then we're going to say publish test result. We're going to remove this. And then this is VS test results. And we called it test.xml. So we're going to leave it like that. We're going to merge our results. And we're going to say the title is Selenium Tests. And then under advanced, we want to make sure that we upload the test result file, which is there by default. And then we can actually save this. And we can release this. So if we go to release 1, we'll wait for this to start. And essentially this would run the same command I ran from my desktop, which was .NET VS test, and then the DLL that is part of our build output. All right, so we can see that all of our stuff ran. If we actually go into the test tab, we'll see that we now have a nice results. Our test passed. It took about 35 seconds to run, and everything is good. So what are the important things to remember now? I did a few things in this demo. So if we go back to Visual Studio, we'll see that we need to have in our project, we need to make sure that we have the selenium.webdriver.chrome driver. We need selenium.webdriver, selenium support, and we need to have the Microsoft.test platform test host. So those are at least the minimum prereq that you need. Then in our project, when we start the Chrome driver, we need to point it to where the assembly of the DLL is, because the Chrome driver.exe is in the same directory. So we need to add that. In order to run our headless tests, we need to have an argument that basically just says headless. And finally, we need, in our project, we need to make sure we add the publish Chrome driver equals true here. Once we have all that, we should be good to go in our project, and we can basically run our tests, build and run our tests basically with the .NET Core tasks in Azure DevOps. So I hope this was interesting, and thank you for listening.